And a while ago, I said that maybe some of you had never been here. No, this is not a very well-known part of UP, unless you are a member of the Alliance Christian Fellowship, which holds their fellowships here every Sunday. No? And Joel suddenly reminded me of a pastor, no? The way he handles things. I should tell the Alliance to recruit you. No? I'm mentioning that, though, because it does show, depending on your perspective, you can look at him and say he would make a good pastor, or is he high again? Or is he just being Joel? No? I've known Joel for many years, no? So we can, in fact, he's going to be part of my story. No? My response here is, I was just taking notes here, and there's just like, ang dami-daming notes dito na pwedeng gamitin. No? And I'm reacting from different perspectives. No? I did want to say the personal is very important to me as well, no? Because I've been there. No? But been there meaning I've seen how the drug scene has changed here in the Philippines. No? I graduated from high school in 1969. No? I'm a senior citizen. And I studied in the other school, the other good school nearby, the first year. No? And then, because it was the ferment of the 70s, my parents sent me abroad to escape the activism and the drugs and everything. They sent me to San Francisco, which was not exactly the best place to be. No? So this was the era of Hair. No? When I came back, we launched the rock musical Hair, Peace, The Age of Aquarius. No? But there was another side to it as well. No? I had a cousin who died on my birthday, actually, in 1972. We grew up together. We were the same age. He died on my birthday. And he was a drug user, but he did not die of the drugs. He died because he had escaped from rehabilitation from Dare, I will name Dare, where they had shamed him. And I think he died heartbroken. Basically, he died in the hospital. And that made an impact on me, about drug use. So through the 70s, you're also young, but the ones who are close to my age, you know what went on in there. Martial law was declared, and one reason why people wanted martial law was because Marcos said he would take care of the drugs. And how did he? You remember early after martial law, what did he do? He had Lim Seng executed by musketry. He was a Chinese drug dealer, and that made an impact on many of the middle class who said, martial law is good, he will get rid of drugs. They passed the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1972, which named all these horrible drugs and what they would do to, including the death sentence. I saw how the drug scene changed. In our era, it was Ekis, Mandrax, it was Benadryl, it was grass, it was different. Shabu came much later. But the drug education campaign seemed to get more and more draconian. It was always fear, use of fear tactics. The rehab was still use of fear and shaming, cut down their self-esteem so that they become humbled and give up the drugs. And the literature, if we want to be evidence-based again, the literature shows those approaches just do not work. But we used it for years, we're still using that. That is still the dominant way. In fact, people will say, pahuli mo na siya, itapon sa bikutan. Parents will actually say, send him off to bikutan, right? And then once the person's in bikutan, naawa naman, call up general, call up some colonel, to get the son out naman. I saw also how the whole scene changed because of HIV/AIDS. Because I worked in HIV/AIDS, that's where I got to know Joel. We were working on many different programs. We were concerned about injecting drug use, which I'll go back to later on, because IDU is very different in the Philippines than in the United States. Then you'll remember also, not too long ago, we were all still required, we had mandatory testing every time we wanted to get our driver's license. Right? Parang kahapon lang yan, because it took them years. The first time this was proposed, I wrote articles saying this is a totally useless thing again, because you can work your way around, and besides, surveillance is not the way to go after drug users. And it took them years to finally realize it was useless, and they finally phased it out, by which time many companies had made millions of pesos off our you remember, that was such an extra chore, and it was ridiculous. You got your drug test within minutes after you urinated. No one, they weren't really testing it, as you know. Ang daming kalokohan na lumalabas dito. And this is why I said yes right away when Ines asked if we could co-sponsor Dr. Hart's talk. And I said, it's time that we have alternative views. There's been a lot of conversations around this, more of whispers among groups that disagreed with what was going on. I should say again, the other personal point here was my ex-partner was very much in Shabu, and I brought him to a very different rehab center that did not use fear tactics. They use cognitive restructuring, meaning, deal with what's going on in your minds and all. No? And that center was Inessa's center. She was the one who ran that center. It was a whole new world for me, and it helped me to understand drug use better. No? Also, because my partner was so involved, my ex-partner, and we actually saw the communities in which drug use was so prevalent. So, babalik tayo dito. I saw the primer, and this is supposed to be the first of conversations. So we're going to have to talk about what the second and the third will be. But this is so important for UP in particular, being Chancellor of UP Diliman. I feel that our work here is we are academics, we're scholastics, we are scientists. And Dr. Hart has pointed out that a lot of the discourse around drug use, a lot of the programs are totally unscientific. It has no place in a university. Yet, if you will go to some of our classrooms where it is taught, very rarely, but it will sometimes be discussed. If you look at medical schools and what they're doing in there, they are using a lot of very unscientific material. And there are so many consequences here. We worry about drug dependence, rightly so. I worry too, and I'll get back to that point also later on. But my main concerns right now is this whole war on drugs in the Philippines has not benefited people. It has not helped the small percentage of drug users who do need help. Not only that, it has victimized many thousands of people. I've asked Ines, I found out only recently that there are hundreds of women. I don't know why women are victimized. Hundreds of women who are languishing in jail, picked up for drug possession. It takes years before their cases are heard. And when their cases are finally heard, the sentence is so harsh. I know at least 2 women who are there for life imprisonment for possession of marijuana. And they leave families behind, and the only reason they're in jail is because they're poor. We know that. They have no connections, although some of them paid thousands of pesos. Their families raised money to pay to lawyers who turned out to be extortionists. So the war on drugs has actually been used against the poor. It has led to incarceration. It has led to extortion. We know how the police raids in urban poor communities will plant drugs, will find all kinds of drug-based uses to extort money from the poor. We've seen sequestration of communities, the demonization of entire communities because people say it in whispers, they're using drugs. And the best example is if you were to go straight down this line, you'll go into the UP campus. The informal settlers there are stigmatized again. People say, gumagamit ng drugs. And that is used also against the informal settlers. Dr. Hart talked about the need to be scientific. And again, in UP, I feel that what is going on in the Philippines has worked against our scientific ethic and ethos. We throw out our philosophy courses on logic when it comes to drug use. We're not logical in looking at the sequence of events. The result there is we have a very poor understanding of the use of drugs and medicines here in the Philippines, the bigger effect in here. And what are some of the consequences that come out of that? It blocks efforts to be rational in dealing with drug use. I'll just give an example here from HIV/AIDS. The main drug used for HIV/AIDS, injecting drug use here, I think some of you are involved in that, is nalbuphine, which always surprises my pharmacologist friends abroad because nalbuphine is not known to be a drug of choice among drug dependents. It's actually a painkiller. Yet it's very popular in Cebu. They actually have shooting galleries in there. You go there, you pay, and you get mainlined with it. And so it raises questions about what addiction and dependency is, as well as, again, the setting, the environment in which this happens. But because we demonize it, we simply conclude that these injecting drug users are like heroin users. We do not have heroin in the Philippines. And doctors do not bother to look into what is happening. When we were sharing this recently with a faculty member of the College of Medicine, he was totally surprised. He had never heard of this nalbuphine problem in Cebu. Yet it is widespread, and it is a main transmission route for HIV/AIDS. Nabufene is also known as Nubain, no? Sometimes used in obstetric wards. No? Parang anong connection ng labor at saka, but that is where it is. No? We also know, I just wanted to say here, yung nabanggit kanina ni Dr. Hart about learning about what are the lessons about drug use. No? And here, one should really expand it because we are so unscientific in our approaches, even when dealing with the legal drugs like alcohol and tobacco, we're not capable of informing our children. No? We're not able to guide them on this, except to saying that's bad, right? It's that whole thing, this is bad, we are not going to talk about it, you are not going to use it, and that's the end of the conversation. We have been trained to think that way. And it blocks many of the efforts for drug education, as well as some of the programs we need in medicine. For many years, morphine was a problem among cancer patients because the doctors did not want to use morphine, again, because morphine is a bad drug. We had very, very low consumption of morphine simply because the medical establishment was afraid to use it. Today, of course, we also find the irrational environment blocks efforts to get medical marijuana in place in the Philippines. I don't know if anyone here is working on that. And looking at this, so many countries have launched their programs of legalizing medical marijuana. And Dr. Hart's story about the 3 presidents got me smiling, because in the 1880s, there's a Filipino who was studying in Spain, and he was corresponding with this German scientist who had asked him, do you use hashish in the Philippines? And he wrote back and he said, yes, we do use hashish in the Philippines. In fact, I used hashish in 1878. This Filipino scientist was Jose Rizal. Okay? He had used hashish, which is marijuana. Okay? Now, don't think of him waiting by some dark corner, waiting to buy grass in a little matchbox. No? He probably bought it from a drugstore in Intramuros. The Ateneo was in Intramuros, and it was legal at that time. And he bought it. He did write in his letter that he did it out of curiosity. No? I was rolling my eyes, and I don't know how many times he went back for it. But when you think about it, no? If you're going to use the illogical logic of the slippery slope that this would have led him to using more dangerous drugs, no? Really, it is a gateway drug towards becoming a national hero, no? Which is Jose Rizal, right? But that's the illogical part. No? Okay, so there are many other things that I think can come out later on. Pero ang punto dito is after listening to this talk, I'm even more convinced that we need to have more conversations in UP and other colleges, no? Medical schools especially, but not just there, but social sciences, psychology, to look at our curricula, maybe even come up with a general education course on the use of drugs. No? I think it is part of life skills to understand what drugs are and how we might want to go about it. No? And I think this will be the best way, actually, to protect our students. I don't like using the term protect, it's very paternalistic, but to get our students, it's a life skill that we must give, and it must be based on science. No? So I hope that I will see many of you again in future conversations sponsored by No Box and by UP. No? And I hope we will move forward so that we're going to have programs that do work, not like all the different programs that I just mentioned from the 1960s onwards. No? Maraming salamat.